Hello and welcome to the Practice Marketing Podcast, highlighting successful strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics and experts so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. Hi, I'm your host, Neil Trickett, CEO of Practice Promotions, and today we're going to focus on how to 10x your clinic's efficiency and profitability this year. And it's great to have with us Mike Dwyer, one of the co-founders here of Prompt EMR, one of the fastest growing EMRs in the rehabilitation industry. And he started Prompt in 2017 alongside co-founder Adam Balitico. And he has developed an amazing system here. And they really look at efficiency on a daily basis and how they make practices more efficient. So, Mike, great to have you on the call with us here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Neil.
Great, awesome. Can you give me just a quick history on Prompt, what you guys have accomplished, and what your mission is?
Yeah, so I started the company after being a patient for 6 years in PT. And something that frustrated me during care was I had no visibility of how I was progressing through care. And I also noticed that patient drop off was a very real thing. I think the stat when we started was 3 out of 10 patients finished their plan of care.
Oh my gosh.
So Adam and we initially created a tool to say to a patient, you're here today, you have X% more room to go.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally that would help them stick to their care plan. And we started selling that our senior year of college. And everyone's like, nice to have, but not need to have. If it doesn't go into my operational workflow day to day, I'm not going to use it. So then we started looking at the operational workflows and saw a lot of area for opportunity to essentially get people off our technology.
Mm-hmm.
The whole point of tech is, as you know, is to do more with less, and we weren't seeing that. And also we came with a background of finance and engineering. So we saw that if we can control the workflows, we can have an impact on the P&L more so than just our patient engagement app.
Mm-hmm.
So we transitioned then to EMR and practice management. And the mission is just to have extraordinary outcomes for the clinic and their patients. And we do that in a bunch of different ways that maybe we can get into.
Yeah, looking forward to talking with you about things that you commonly see as you work with, hundreds or thousands of practice owners all across the U.S. And there's commonalities, right? There's common inefficiencies that are there in the practices, but that's what creates the drag, right? That's what hurts the practice at the
business. It's like it's a 10% to 15% margin business in most states.
Right.
And you probably hear this all the time. Reimbursements going down, expenses are going up.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially you have to find an edge. And we tell people focus on what you can control, and you can control your expenses.
Right. Yeah. And it's a service industry. We're in a service industry, and it's about time too, right? And making sure that the money that you're paying for therapists to serve people, like their time is costly, right? It's valuable, and we need to make sure that they are able to maximize time with patients instead of the patient dropout issue, right, which really hurts that ability. So it's great that you'll get, and I know I come from the days of paper charts, right? So we started out with paper charts, and then I remember some of the first EMRs that were like starting to happen.
Did you ever convert to EMRs, or did you?
We did, yeah. So we went from that paper world to full EMR world in our practice, and learning curve for all the therapists for sure, but it made you realize too that and especially in today's world, it just gets even heavier, right? The tech stack that's in the practice, right? And we chatted about this before, but if your therapists are having to use lots and lots of different types of technology, they have to learn each one of those technologies, right? And so the more integrated and efficient it becomes, the easier it is for them to operate and just do their daily stuff, right?
PTs didn't get into this to sit behind a keyboard all day. So
yeah, definitely. And so you've worked again with hundreds or thousands of practices across the US here. And so in what you've seen, what would you say are like the top 5 things that makes a practice inefficient?
So, I mean, the PT business, I don't find it to be like insanely complicated. Like, it's how do you maximize the revenue potential per therapist per day while reducing the amount of admin exposure they have to be doing.
Mhm.
So for us, it's how do you keep the schedule full, and how do you do that, without breaking your back and having burnout. So that's number one. Just how do you maximize the schedule with the
Mhm.
right payer mix and then keeping it full. Typically, we see that people are over indexed to admin and billing, and they're able to reduce that exposure with the right tech stack. Clean claim rate would be number three.
Okay.
So for us, it's how do you maximize the coding for that payer and justify it with
Mhm.
the appropriate documentation? And then how do you get paid on that claim on the first submit correctly? Because if you're having to touch the claim on the back end, you're having billers do that,
Yeah.
which also isn't cheap.
Yeah.
Number four, I would say keeping patients compliant with their plan of care and also making it easy for them to pay the office is key.
Mhm.
As you know, in your world, creating a new patient for the practice is cost money and
Yeah.
time. So you really have to maximize each patient's plan of care. And then I guess number five, to my point earlier that therapists don't get into this to sit behind a computer, how do you get point of service documentation done where they're not taking work home with them, you're not losing therapists, you're not in a wheel of having to recruit. So yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be my
So many
guess.
things, right? Like it's amazing when I hear you list those out. It's like, gosh, you just realize like how many different aspects along that journey, right? That the patient comes through that we have to handle the different aspects in the business. And so, there's the experience of the patient, right? Then there's the all the data that we need to collect from the patient, whether it's, all their insurance and all those kind of things, right? Make sure we get that properly handled, right? And then the actual delivery of the care and the documentation of the care. And then we got to make sure we get paid for it properly. And that was so great that you said that, like, clean claim, man. That just makes so much sense because if you do it right the first time, you can expect that payment to come in the way that it should, hopefully, right? But let's face it, insurance companies are in it for the game, and they're at any chance they can deny a claim, they're going to do it, right? So if that claim is not clean, that's when you start to chip away at that money you made for that hour that you were with the patient, right? And we want to retain as much of that as possible.
Yeah, I mean, regardless if you're on Prompt or somewhere else, like you need that to be validated before it goes. Make sure it's proper coded, and then you really should be sub 5% denial rate. And if you're not, something is out of whack typically on the front end that's impacting that.
Could you repeat that sub what was it, sub 5%?
Sub 5% is the standard across our user base. Um,
Okay.
I mean, if you're doing 100% work comp, you'll be a little bit higher, but
Hmm.
that's generally where people land.
Gotcha. And so obviously there's those different areas there. What would you say um, is the number one thing that kills the profitability in the practice?
Capacity. So whenever we go into a new clinic, if you have 100 hours available and you're only filling it with 80% billable time,
Mm.
you're leaving 20% of potential revenue on the table. So what we try to get people to is closer to 95%, meaning out of 100 hours of the week, I'm billing 95
Mhm.
hours of that time. Even if you're 100% scheduled, if you have a 15 to 20% no show cancel rate, you're still hovering at that 80%.
Right.
So you have to have processes to fill that vacancy,
Hmm.
um, which we have good tools for.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I've talked to so many people, and that's one of the things that we also push from practice promotions on clients is you got to keep the schedule full, right? That's what it's all about. The more full the schedule is, the more money you're making, right? Bottom line, right? And all those costs get better for that. The profitability gets better of the clinic. So it's awesome that you look at that, and it's interesting the way that you phrased it, because even if you're at 100% full, if you have a high no-show or cancellation rate, it's sometimes it's something you feel, but you don't necessarily see clearly, right? But if you have
See,
that
at the end of the month when you
data, right?
balance the bank account,
Right. Man, and yeah, I've seen that too, and I've had D Bills with Front Office Guru on
it's
here
the best.
a few times. She's awesome, but it's like that thing, right? Because it's all about the control also at the front desk, because it's about keeping that schedule full. I mean, we're trying to pump them in from the marketing so that you get new patients in the door, but if they're leaking out the bottom because they don't show, and that's
I
on
love
huge.
what Dee puts out there. It's also making it easy for a patient to stay compliant with their plan of care. So if Neil Trickett is underbooked by 2 visits next week, what processes do you have in place to, one, be aware of that, but two, to let them actually get back on the schedule for the right frequency?
Mhm.
That's what we try to really hone in with every new client.
Gotcha. So when you start to work with a client, you're looking at that, right? What other key things do you really start to look at with them in that kind of evaluation process?
We look at their admin to full-time equivalent ratio. So we find a good ratio to be 0.2 to 0.3.
Okay.
So
Do you find clinics that are often higher than that?
yeah, usually 0.4 to 0.6.
And so for our lay people out there, what does that really mean?
It means if you have 10 practitioners, you'll typically have 5 admin.
Okay.
When you can, with the right processes and systems in place, have 2 to 3.
hmm Gotcha. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because probably I always say the number one cost in small business is typically labor, right? So, especially in a practice, right?
The
So,
highest expense. And it's like
the highest expense.
you can't afford to not make 60% of your P&L as efficient as humanly possible,
hmm
is our view.
Yeah. So you want to have your providers, right, being super full and having the right amount, but the least amount of admin support that makes everything work properly, right?
Yep. And then along the lines with admins, I look at claims per biller. So the norm of people is usually 1,500 to 2,000 claims per full-time biller.
Okay.
And usually get that to 4 to 6,000
hmm
prompt. So I'm not saying like necessarily fire these people, but how do we get people on more revenue producing tasks that impact the bottom line more
Yeah.
is generally our goal.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, especially on the billing side of things, if you can get it done more right at the get-go, then you don't need as much
Right.
admin time to correct the issues when they come back.
Yeah, it just inflates time. Like when you have a denial, it delays payment. You're having to fight the insurance company.
hmm
We try to do everything we can on the front end to prevent that.
Yeah. I remember, story for me is when I had my practice, I had a really good office manager. And it's just, this is a testament that things don't always stay the way that they do, right? She was really good. She was awesome. That's why I put her in the office manager role. She was good at that. And then things happened in her world, right? That were related to family and things like that. And it impacted her. It impacted her ability to focus, and things started to go wrong. And we ended up in a point where, gosh, we were almost bankrupt because we had such outstanding accounts receivable. And, as an owner, I had to just step in there and start to really look, right? Start to observe, not just take people's word for what's going on. And when I got in there, I realized like there was things like checks that were put in folders that were never cashed, so crazy stuff like that. So I had to unfortunately let that person go and just revamp that billing department in our practice. But it was a lesson learned for me, because then I working with the EMR that we had at the time and understanding, yeah, billing's complicated, but like starting to understand that process and how that works, and then look at how we should be putting claims out. And we were able to collect that money back within 3 months, and then get on a rate where we were actually collecting 90%, over 90% of what we should be owed within 2 weeks. So we got to a really good point, but it takes some work, takes some effort, takes some focus looking in there. But it is a big testament to that efficiency in the billing department, because you
Number
can be
one
working your
reason
tail
people
off, but if you're not getting paid from the insurance company, you're not making the money.
So number one, people, we do a survey whenever someone switches to us of like, why did you start looking? And the number one reason is billing, actually.
Really? How
Yeah.
many people would you say, like what percentage of practices that you work with are, maybe if they started or they continue to do it, they do the billing on their own, or they use a billing
It's about
company?
70% do it in-house, 30% outsource it.
So it's really critical to have the right systems and processes,
Yeah,
because
and then also the owner being aware of what they need to look at
yeah,
daily, weekly, monthly to make sure it's going well.
yeah,
Our average client is 5 practitioners roughly, and typically the owner is also treating a 40-hour schedule, and things like this get missed where it's like, oh shoot, like why haven't I get paid net for the past 30 days?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. You don't want to be behind the curve, right? That's where you start to get trouble, right? Real trouble.
there's two extremes. There's people that look at no data, and then there's people that look at every single data point. So we try to give them a little bit in the middle
Yeah,
of that.
makes sense. It makes sense. So speaking of that, the what would you say that a practice owners, how do they need to have that mind shift towards improving efficiency in their practice?
I guess it kind of depends what they want to do. Like if they just want to have an office that's not growing, like, but if you're trying to grow the practice, you just have to be very KPI driven and manage around that.
Hmm.
Uh, so we typically recommend having 2 to 3 KPIs per user in the practice and monitoring that and making sure you have what's excellent, what's good, what's bad underneath each KPI, and
Hmm.
just run those daily and make sure people are tracking to what they should be doing.
Yeah.
And if they're not, then they're probably not the right person for the practice.
Do you want more freedom in your clinic? Then you need to work on your business, not just in it. The top practice owners know that they need a marketing system that consistently attracts patients from the internet. And at Practice Promotions, we've helped hundreds of practice owners skyrocket to the top of Google and get more new patients from online. Go to practicepromotions.net/kit to get our free practice marketing sample kit. It includes all our digital marketing tips and tricks that will get you new patients from Google. That's practicepromotions.net/kit, KIT, for a free marketing kit. And now back to the show.
We mentioned it earlier here, where the rehab world is just it's changed so much, right? And we all know that reimbursements aren't changing a whole lot.
That's where
And
the mind shift has to come from. It's like
yeah,
when your margin's getting compressed, if you don't change your mindset, you're not going to be making more money.
right. Or keeping the money that you're already making, right?
Right.
Or the percentages that you're making, because they will
Yeah.
get eroded over time.
So we have a core value at Prompt: complacency kills, and
I like that.
we try to live by that. Like the second you get complacent, things erode and become problems.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what the most successful clients that we have are the ones that are constantly try to change, right? Constantly try to evolve and know that they need to evolve. And the clients that tend to suffer are the ones that are, they're handling everything themselves, right? And they're trying to just keep it small, right? Because they feel that that might be comfortable. So I would just say, you have to push yourself outside your comfort zone, right? And you have to evolve and
Spend
change.
time with each user. It's like the way we built, I'm not saying switch to Prompt, but like the way we built this platform is we spent 2 years with the patient, the biller, the administrator, the clinician, understand their pain points and find areas of opportunity to help solve that. That may not be an EMR switch. It may be just getting rid of this redundant process that takes your admin user 2 hours a week that they don't have to be doing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. And do you find that brings me to a question as far as like insurance authorizations, right? So is that something that you see drains a lot of time in the clinics?
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's not a great solution for that. It's like the payer's not super incentivized to make that easier, I think.
Right.
We've tried doing the online checks, but a lot of times they pull, this is an active plan, this is the right address, right member ID, yada yada. But saying Neil Trickett has 2K left deductible, it's less good. But you still can use these online checks to get the base level of information.
Right.
But yes, it's a big time drain.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to have a solution there, but we haven't found one yet that's perfect.
Now,
but if you can take, like, we just launched a kiosk that lets the patient self check in, fill out their intake, book more visits.
nice.
If you can take that administrator who's doing a lot of that work and move them to OS, so you make sure they're getting paid for their work on the back end, like that's a good trade-off in our mind.
Yeah. I like that. That makes a lot of sense. So that's pretty cool. A new kiosk up front.
You gotta watch our commercial. As a marketer, I feel like you would love that.
Yeah, I love that. I got to check that out. That sounds awesome.
I'll send it to you.
So, one thing I really like about Prompt 2 is like you said, there's data, right? And so we don't want little, we don't want too much, right? We want the right amount. And so in today's world, it's just more important than ever to make the decisions for your practice on that data. So how have you at Prompt helped get that right information in front of a business owner?
Part of it is like our support team making people understand what does your data mean and how does it impact other things.
Right.
So I guess to rewind a little bit, like we got there by figuring out what are our best clinics doing that are most profitable and how can we impart that knowledge on our user base. And then next, how do we take our expertise and impart that on our clients? Because it's not just like, what is this KPI? It's what can I do to influence this to make it better? So we've hired only people that have lived the role they're supporting. So if you have a clinical question, you're getting a clinician. If you have a billing question, you're getting a biller who's run offices. If you have an administrative question, you're getting an administrator who's ran practices, et cetera, et cetera. That's how we approach it.
That's a really nice feature because there, you can have the technology, right? But there's the learning curve to it. And what I found too is I've always been technologically inclined to some extent. And so when I remember we started an EMR at the practice, I was the go-to person for questions, right? And so as a practice owner, you don't want to be the go-to person for all the technical questions with EMR. You want it, like you said, it's great that the admin person or the front desk has a question about how to use the scheduling software or something there. So they have certain questions that they could get the answer by the team, or the biller has a different kind of set of questions, or the therapist is trying to come up with certain kind of new template for a progress note that they're doing, something like that, right? So I like that you can delegate to your staff, hey, go contact support.
Lean on your EMR. They probably have someone that's heard the question before. But also what we've learned is EMR usage is directly correlated to someone's NPS on our product, which I guess isn't shocking. But if you're using 6 out of the 10 features available to you, you'll like Prompt. If you're using 5.9 and less, you will not like Prompt. So I think that's also something to impart, is like, ask your EMR what's new, because I'm on so many meetings where their current EMR can do what they want it to do in some way, but the clinic is so busy, they're bogged down where they're not staying up with those updates. So yeah, lean on your EMR.
And so as you're in the world of EMRs, so I'm just kind of curious, What are some of the most common issues or things that you see with the EMRs that practice owners face?
Like why people are moving to us?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, to your point, margin compression, like trying to find an edge, but also have happier staff. Like
Okay.
retention and recruiting is top of mind for everyone right now.
Yeah. So
And
does that have a big impact then, like their frustration using the EMR with their staff?
yeah, like if someone's taking notes home with them on the weekend, not spending time with their family, like that's a drag.
Yeah.
If your biller is on until 10 p.m. at night billing claims, like that's not great either.
Right.
Um,
That's a great thing. Like not even I wasn't even thinking about that direction, as far as staff retention, right? And how that impacts that and efficiency, right? So it comes, with inefficiency comes frustration, not just by the practice owner, but the staff, right? They're frustrated that they're having to spend so much time on something. And so the easier you can make their job, right, the happier that they'll be, right? The more productive they'll be. So that's really cool.
I mean, everyone in the practice got into this to help patients largely. Like most people we talked to, they didn't get into this to make 50 million bucks in a year and
Hmm.
get out.
Yeah, they wanted the freedom and way to do it
And why
themselves.
did you get involved in PT?
It's
Like,
same reason as most people, right? Which is like I wanted to do things my own way, right? And I wanted some ability to grow something, right? So that's really why I started in my own practice. And I saw other people doing it. I'm like, hey, they're doing that. I didn't see the headaches that they had, right? But I'm like, hey, this must be, the way that I can do it too, right? Uh,
you got into help people.
that's
Yeah.
right, exactly. So we see practice owners, they're working really hard on all these little things in their business, and we're talking about profits eroding, things like that. And if they're saying like, hey, my profits seem lower than they should be, and they feel kind of pulled, and their profitability is not there, they're spending lots of hours that they shouldn't be at the clinic. Like, what would you say that they need to change first from like an inefficiency, or what should they really start looking at first from that inefficiency standpoint?
I mean, for us, we look at revenue per visit, we look at capacity, we look at admin to FTE ratio on billing in front office, and we look at how fast is it taking you to submit charges and are they correct on the first
Mhm.
submit.
Cool.
So I'd start there. Like it's hard to be profitable if you're making 60 bucks a visit. It's
Yeah.
hard to be profitable if 70% of your schedule is full at any given time.
Mhm.
It's hard to be profitable if you have 7 admins for 10 FTEs. So yeah, I would start rethinking like how are we structuring our business with staffing?
Yeah.
How are we structuring our schedule to optimize the schedule?
Yeah.
Um,
I think in business, we have those pivot moments, right? And we I think for most businesses, the only constant is change, right? And I do remember this point in our practice when we were fairly young there, where I was very much into manual therapy. I went to the Canadian College of Osteopathy and all that kind of stuff, and so I wanted to have, we kind of started out with one-on-one because like a lot of clinics start out on one-on-one care because they don't have enough patients yet, right? But we got busier and we were trying to keep that one-on-one model. And then you've hired therapists and you have admin people. And for me, it was that realization like, we're kind of scraping by here, even though we're busy, and having to really look at the business and how other people ran their practices and businesses. The majority were seeing patients on a half hour or 45 minutes. And so just I had to have that epiphany where it's like, what's holding me back is that the schedule's full, but the amount of income per hour basically that we were able to produce was not where it
if you're
should.
breaking even, you can't grow. Like we just did a study of why people are leaving care. So one of our team members, Emma Brady, who I believe you know, she runs a group called the Clinical Transition, And something that I found interesting, the number one reason why people are leaving care out of 500 respondents is career growth opportunities aren't there. And if you're not able to grow your business and provide those opportunities, people are going to leave and find something else. So that's another thing of why I think it's so important to increase your profitability. You lose people if you're not growing.
That's really fantastic study or survey that you guys did. Wow, that's
Number two was
yeah.
wages, like being capped at salary. So if you have more margin and you're able to pay your team more,
Mhm.
you'll keep your team more.
Right. Let's face it. I mean, that is across
Same
the
thing in your
board.
business, right? Like it's the
Yeah.
same thing in mine. Like
Everybody wants to make more money, right? And wants more opportunities, and you just got to keep pushing forward, right? Yeah, totally. Wow. And that is, I mean, I talked to so many practice owners, and it is where we're at right now because of so many different things in the environment, but labor shortages, right? That's just going to be something going forward. And you have to be,
we had the APTA president, Justin Morin, yesterday, and he said a stat that there's 14K openings and 16,000 applicants.
all right, so say that again, 14,000 openings.
Openings
Yeah.
and 16,000 applicants. And he mentioned like 20 years ago, the acceptance rate in the PT school was 20%. Now
Mhm.
it's over 80%. And why people
That,
are
oh, was that for colleges, like
colleges.
programs? So there's 14,000 openings, but there's 16,000 applicants for
16,000
14,000
applicants.
openings.
Yeah.
Wow. When I went to school, there were 65 seats and there was 1,000 people applying.
Exactly. Yeah.
So competitive to get in. Holy cow.
So people are picking other professions because they're just
Yeah.
doing math. Like if I have 150K debt and I'm coming out and making 70, 75K, that math becomes pretty hard.
Yeah.
But if you're able to be more profitable, which is
Mhm.
what we're shooting for at Prompt Clinic, and you're able to pay your PT 90 to 100, at least the math is making more sense to
Yeah.
take that position.
Yeah.
But like if I can make 200, 175, 200K going to be a nurse as a college student,
Mhm.
I'd probably pick that.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm such an advocate for we should be, as therapists, you should be getting paid what you should be getting paid, just as much as like a nurse is, things like that. We're just there's all these other challenges, right, in the environment. And we tend to just focus one on the payment side of it. I think there's some fairness in pay that needs to be handled from how people get paid in the hospital versus how they get paid in an outpatient clinic.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
But there's also that balance of how do you create demand. I'm also, one of my thoughts too was like, I graduated a bachelor's degree, like I think you should keep the doctorate, but bring back some of the bachelor's
That's what
program.
he was saying is like you're going to have to get creative as a school because the math is not going to make sense pretty soon.
Yeah.
If you have 14,000 openings and 10,000 applicants, the school is losing a lot of money there.
Yeah. So that's really, so coming back to that, right? We know that there's going to be continued shortages of therapists being pumped out of schools, right? As well as people that exit out of the workforce from all kinds of reasons, right? So the talent pool shrinking, you have to be much more
To
competitive.
differentiate yourself. Like if
You
you're
gotta
able to
differentiate,
create an area where people aren't burdened and burnt out, they're able to make more with, doing more visits.
Yeah.
Like I'd rather work there than somewhere where I'm making less and I'm burnt out on my technology.
Yeah. I think too, yeah, I see that, right? I see that in a practice. Like if I was a PT and I had friends that worked at a certain place and they're telling me that it runs way smoother than my clinic, that's going to be attractive to me, right? So if that clinic has its stuff together and they have great systems in place and it's easier to operate as a therapist in those places, right? That's going to be much more attractive.
A good gut test there is when you show an applicant your EMR and brag about it during recruiting. And if you can't, give us a call.
Okay, I like that. Awesome. And so we've talked about so many different things here in regards to inefficiencies and efficiencies in the practice here, EMRs, those kind of things. So, for our audience out there, as practice owners, what kind of realistic goals should they be setting for themselves when it comes to looking at improving their efficiency in their practice? What kind of things that should they tackle?
Spending time actually doing it. Sit with each user for hours a week, and you'll easily be able to find a few hours of inefficiency here and there where you can revert that energy to something that has more value to the practice.
Mm.
So I would say just, I don't know, I like to say our team, we try to live the roles we're supporting for things and building for things. Live with your front desk for a few days. Live with your biller for a few days. And I'd be surprised if you didn't find some areas of opportunity.
Wow, that's great advice. Absolutely great advice. Yeah, and you see it, I see it. Practice owners they're trying hard, right? And they tend to carry a full caseload of patients most of the time, right? And then they're trying to do all this other stuff on top of it, and you just can't. If you're going to grow your business, you have to step back a little bit from patient care. You have to have enough time, as you said, to sit with that front desk and learn and see what's going on. You have to sit with that biller, see what's going on, and together you can work on processes and how things are run and look for those inefficiencies. But you can't do it if you don't have the time.
Yeah, and also like leaning on people like your EMR, I'm sure has found ways that their best practices are doing things, or talking to peers. Like I was just on a call with someone that says the most valued part of their week is their peer-to-peer network through PPS, where they trade ideas of how they're doing things. So
yeah,
maybe take a visit off the schedule and try doing stuff like that.
Yeah, I would say too, like one of the best things to do is just make sure you have time blocks. So sometimes you might, what I've seen people try to do is they put like, okay, I'll take an hour off on a Monday or an hour off every day of the week. That's not as efficient as if you say, hey, Monday, I'm going to carve out, 3 hours of time here just to work on admin stuff. And then on a Friday, I'm taking 2 hours to work on admin stuff. It's the same amount of time, but you're much more productive and efficient.
Like Monday
in your
is
block.
my admin day. I don't take
Yeah.
any meetings and I just work on the business.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So Mike, fantastic words of advice here today for our listeners. Thank you so much here. If you haven't checked out Prompt yet, I do think it's something you should definitely check out. They are very innovative there, and they really look at things from that efficiency standpoint and making it life easier in the practice with technology and solutions there. So, Mike, what's the best way for people to learn more about Prompt?
Yeah, our website, booking a demo, no pressure, like we're not going to force you to sign a contract the next day, but it can be helpful just to see what's out there. And then my email is Mike at Prompt EMR if anyone wants to chat therapy. Happy to do it.
We'll get that information out for everybody here too. So yeah, if you haven't had a chance, look at Prompt, that's PROMPTEMR.com. Great, lots of great advice and tips on there, even if you're not checking out the system. So definitely check out the website there. And Mike, thanks for being on the podcast with us here today. I appreciate you being on here and sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Excellent. And so thanks everybody. Thanks to our audience out there. Make sure you subscribe and follow to us to keep getting more tips and advice like this. Again, this is Neil Trickett here from Practice Promotions, and I'm wishing you much success in your practice.
Thank you for listening to the Practice Marketing Podcast. Don't forget to get your free practice marketing sample kit at practicepromotions.net/kit. Start 2024 off the right way by building marketing systems that automatically attract new patients from online. That's practicepromotions.net/kit.